Welcome, welcome, everyone. We are sitting here with Matt Kahn, and we just received his latest book, All for Love, which we're going to talk about today. And we're here to have a chit chat about one of his favorite conversations, which is love. But buried within love, there's a whole bunch of other qualities, characters, and topics that we're going to cover today.
Thanks for having me. It's truly an honor to be here.
So, Matt, you are a spiritual teacher, a highly attuned empathic healer. I loved that language, by the way. A motivational speaker and a captivating author. And I can certainly concur with the captivating author part. Yeah, beautiful work. His mission is to enrich people's lives by providing heart-centered solutions that ignite, delight, and unite. I know, it's beautiful. So Matt's written several books. Some of them include Whatever Arises, Love That. Everything is here to help you. The universe always has a plan, which has been translated into more than a dozen languages. And his newest book, which I've already mentioned, All for Love, The Transformative Power of Holding Space. Known as the I love you guy, Matt was named, I know, gotta love it. Matt was named one of the top 100 most spiritually influential living people by Watkins Magazine, alongside the Dalai Lama and Eckhart Tolle. So well done.
Thank you.
Impressive bio.
Thank you.
So anyway, before we dive into your latest book, I wanted to talk about a video that I had seen of you way back, and you were talking about something that you refer to as divine orchestration. And wow, was I brought into that. So this divine orchestration of relationships, of love, of tragedies, of the dark nights of the soul, all of these things, that they're here to help us evolve and grow, right? And to serve our highest evolution. And this is the part that I love, because we've talked about this in some of the work that we do. Some of the relationships that come in to do that can be a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
They can be rough, but they're actually here to help serve us. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's in our life's journey, we go along a certain path of consciousness. What do I want for my life? What about my life needs to either stay the same or change to either maintain the happiness I have, or what do I need to do to gain more of the happiness I don't think I have? And we're constantly in this pattern of trading up experiences, trading this experience for that experience, trading up this pursuit of identity for this pursuit of identity. And at a certain point, and it's different for every human being, there's an expansion or awakening of consciousness. And we start to realize is that each and every outcome has been created not just to be the fulfiller of a desire or an expectation, but that the desire and expectation is actually what pulls us into the arena of allowing our experiences, no matter how often they come and go, whether the experience is what we envisioned or categorically the opposite of what we envisioned, that every single moment is actually helping us to turn some sort of weakness into a strength and to balance out some degree of imbalance within us. And that at a certain point of our life's journey, there's a wellspring of maturity that expands within us, whether it's acquired by age, experience, and the aftermath of trauma. And we start to really harmonize with life's plan with us, and to be in less negotiation of how do I get my plan to be imposed onto the will of the universe. And I have found throughout my journey as an empathic healer that it's the human being's opportunity that the more often they love themselves, the more often they give to themselves all that seemed to be absent from the past. As we love ourselves, we actually join with the universe in honoring our personal self, our bodies, our minds, our hearts, as the vessel through which divinity is remembering itself in its most unique way. And so as we love ourselves, it tends to help us relax this grip of attachment. And instead of trying to figure out what do I need to change and rearrange in my life for this constant, perpetual, exhausting reinvention, the question becomes, how can I harmonize with the will of the universe and fulfill its plan for me, knowing that whatever I lack in my life, what I'm really looking for is the love that only I can provide myself. And when we start to really connect that piece, it literally becomes the nucleus that births and expands a brand new reality in our hearts and literally transforms us from the inside out.
Wow. I mean, that's powerful. I mean, it really does come down to the self-love. It starts here, right?
Yes.
Because, and I think that's so hard for so many people, it shouldn't be, right? I mean, it's kind of like, I love this analogy Tony Robbins used years ago where he was kind of talking about our bodies as a car. And if you don't fill the car up with gas, right, the gas being love, right, that you cannot give to other people.
Absolutely.
So that kind of made sense. I mean, especially for women who are always nurturing.
I wanted to just kind of go on that point of the expansion of consciousness.
Sure.
And there appears sometimes that there are individuals or many individuals who go through many different difficulties in their lives and whatever it may be. But for some particular reason, they don't seem, or at least it doesn't appear this way, that they're having an expansion of consciousness.
Right.
And they seem to be in the same place that they've always been their entire lives. What is the reason for that? Why are they not having an expansion of consciousness?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I'm glad you brought it up. Each emotional state that we will ever experience requires a certain amount of time for us for a certain amount of time to be under a certain degree of intensity or pressure. In the same way that cookie dough, whether the cookie dough is trying to surrender to what is or is resisting at every turn, the cookie dough needs to be in the heat of the oven for a certain amount of time to go from dough to a cookie. And so each and every emotion that we experience, and we go in and out of feeling. So let's say you feel sadness and you felt sadness for a couple of minutes. That's now taking off of the total time, the few minutes that you were with sadness. And each feeling is only going to come back in an oscillating fashion for a certain amount of time. And we oscillate between different states. When we have spent a certain duration of time in certain emotional states, that gains us the energetic and conscious evolutionary, oh God, what's the word I want to use? Like when you buy a house, equity. It builds up a certain amount of equity that then creates an expansion of consciousness. The question for every soul's journey is that how long will it take a certain individual at their level of consciousness to feel feelings for a certain amount of time before they start popping open? Will this lifetime that we are coexisting with people be a time of great intensity so that the realization they have as they leave the body and return to the afterlife becomes an instigating awakening they have in childhood in their next lifetime? Will they be born awake in some other country and then this becomes the story of their service? So I think when we look at it, every soul has a certain amount of time that they will take preparing for consciousness to expand. And the way we build up that equity is by learning how to fully feel our feelings and learning to process them viscerally instead of mentally extrapolating and trying to bypass and all these other things that we do as a way of trying to soothe ourselves when we don't feel safe emotionally. And so I think that everyone in the world, because consciousness is expanding on such a fast rate right now, everyone is in some stage of conscious expansion, but most people who are entering this trajectory are still in the preparatory stage of feeling their feelings and building up that equity and that momentum that will then create an expansion at a future time. And for each and every one of us, we decide how that journey looks and feels, not only by our spiritual aspirations, but the attention we're willing to give our emotional body. So when I'm teaching people to love themselves, it's to make it safe to feel and face what is priming their consciousness for the awakening. That is not only helping to expand their soul's journey, but adding to the consciousness, expanding this planet, and helping to rebirth Earth into a more sustainable global village for all beings.
And it's helping the collective, right?
One more question.
Yes.
Why is there an expansion of consciousness going at a faster rate and velocity than ever before amongst all human beings? Why is it occurring?
It's occurring because consciousness is always in a state of expansion. And there's been in history a certain amount of time where the field of reality, the quantum field, supported awakened individuals to pop up into the field to reflect their testimony, whether we say a Lao Tzu, whether we say a Buddha or a Jesus or a Emmanuel, whatever name you want to give to these types of beings. And they were really reflecting the prophecy that the second coming of Messiahhood, and I don't want to get too religious, is actually, the second coming is actually the I am on a collective level. The second coming is conscious community. And so these beings were reflecting the truth that was still brewing in the atmosphere of the earth. And as more and more individuals wake up, it expands the energy of consciousness, where as consciousness expands, it starts to move equal to the speed of light and even faster than the speed of light. And of course, faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought. And we start to expand this consciousness to where now in history, the divine has reached a point where it wants to remember itself in a way it never has, which could only be on a collective level. And so now what we're seeing are the building blocks for the awakening of a conscious humanity. And in order for us to have a conscious humanity, we first have to be conscious of the unconsciousness that's been running humanity for far too long.
Wow. That's such a profound answer. You've asked that question before.
One more question.
But that was the best answer I think we've ever gotten for that question.
You.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Profound. The I am who I am.
That's right.
Does the expansion of consciousness as it is evolving now, faster and faster at a greater velocity than ever before, at least it appears that way. You said that consciousness always expands.
Yes.
The universe is always recreating itself.
Yeah.
Is it directly proportional to the expansion of the universe itself?
Yes, I would say that the universe is in a constant state of expansion. There's never a moment the universe is not expanding. And so in our quantum reality, that ever-expanding nature of the universe has to be reflected in the storylines and lives of the individual, individually and collectively. In our play of humanity, in our play of time and space, it seems as if consciousness is only expanding when we're the most willing participants in its evolution. That in and of itself is only because it's helping us to see the value of being a participant in co-creation. But the truth is, outside of individuality, outside of the perception of cause and effect, the universe is always in an ever state of expansion. And that what we're doing on this planet to be heart-centered, to rid ourselves of defense mechanisms, and to really raise the vibration so that on a societal level, we can manifest a reality where all beings can be safe and respected and honored with sovereignty, that on a collective level universally, as that occurs, as even another cell and atom and molecule awakens as light in every person, the universe expands and thousands of more universes are literally created within a split second. And so we are actually living out a play that is depicting the story of universal consciousness having no other intention, ambition, or reaction or response, but to constantly grow and expand.
Wow.
Very entanglement.
I mean, you want to talk about codependency, nothing more codependent than the universe, if I can be honest. Codependent universe.
Well, it's been said that when one soul awakens in its physical form, right?
Yeah.
When it actually awakens and shines its light and it gets brighter and vibrationally, that it lights up 1,000 more individuals without
That's
even
right.
realizing, the ripple effect, right? The cause and effect, the ripple effect. So
Absolutely.
that's powerful, right? That a lot of times, people will ask and they want these grandiose things of what they can do to save the environment, to save whatever. And it's really like starting with yourself, right? Just living, being, starting with love. Your favorite topic.
It is my favorite topic. And I think there's an interesting connection of how our internal reality kind of creates a magnification outside of us, in the sense that if we live in a world that looks like we're living in a world of depleted resources, we're living in a world where things are not as sustainable as they used to be, right? The reflection of it is, yes, I can recycle, I can compost. Those are all beautiful things, very important. But on a very deep existential level, when I am able to love myself, require less of other people, and when being myself is less of an exhausting experience for myself, I am becoming what we can call more conscious. But I would even dare to say, just to kind of create an interesting conversation, we're becoming more sustainable in ourselves. That being ourselves doesn't exhaust so much energy. Being ourselves doesn't cause us to be depleted by the end of the day. We can do from a state of being and not just go back and forth between doing and being. And as we become more sustainable in our consciousness, we are then putting energy to help reverse the karmic wheel, reverse global warming, and return our world to a state of sustainability by how sustainably we learn to be with our own energy. And so I think there's a very interesting connection there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it makes me think of something else too, right? That it has the ripple effect. So, what you're talking about is becoming sustainable ourselves, and that has the ripple effect to the whole without even having to think about it.
That's right.
This also kind of brings me to the question of, when people talk about evil, right? So as an individual consciousness and a collective consciousness, if we're not even giving credence to or energy to it,
right,
then it doesn't have a chance of breathing. So that diminishes as well, right? Because we're not plugging into that old, dense consciousness of perceived evil, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that, what we would call evil, we can do a play on words, that evil is a life lived backwards, because evil backwards is lived, right? So it's just we're seeing things backwards. And what happens is that vibrationally, there are some beings that say, if we don't indulge this consciousness, it collapses out of the field. But emotionally, part of the problem is that what is creating the unconscionable behavior of what we would label as evil is a level of pain that is crying out to be seen, heard, and valued. And of course, we're not going to value the actions of someone who is harming and mistreating people. But I think as we awaken our consciousness, we start to look at a world and we say, how can we start to rehabilitate the consciousness of people instead of just imprison people and punish them? And so I think that when we look at evil, I look at evil as an energetic and emotional crisis in which my ability as a healer to heal both victims and predators, because I do both work, is because I know that work, even though I don't agree with the actions people do to other people to harm them, is going to start creating less and less victims in the world. And so I think when we look at how do we break cycles, we don't have to necessarily give energy to what we would call evil in terms of trying to fight. That kind of energy is only going to empower it, but we can still turn towards it. We can still turn towards the innocence buried underneath the pain. And when we're willing to see the innocence in the most unconscionable criminal behavior, it's at that point where even just seeing their innocence makes that person incapable of hiding from their innocence, which helps to rehabilitate their journey, which energetically spreads throughout the world to make this world even 1 degree safer, just by daring to find innocence in even the darkest of hearts.
Yeah, it's very healing.
Yeah.
It's kind of Azim's story, who's also going to be in this series, who wrote the book From Murder to Forgiveness. I don't know if you're aware of him.
I've never, but it sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it went viral on TED, but just, this man who not just forgave the man who murdered his son, but hired him and made him part of the family after he got out of jail. Yeah. So that's kind of what you're talking about, because he speaks about the power of the forgiveness as healing forward, backward, in every direction, right? That was also healing for his family.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a story I once heard, and I forget the details, but the story was that there was a member of the KKK somewhere in the South wearing their, whole gear. And an African-American gentleman approached this man at the end of one of their rallies, and they just started talking. And the African-American gentleman invited this man from the Klan to his home for dinner. And this man went with him to dinner right then and there, walked in wearing his KKK gear, sat down with his family, and after spending a few hours having dinner with them, quit the KKK. And how it's the ability for us, in spite of how things are decorated, in spite of how people are cast into certain molds or characters, there's just a certain point in life, and we don't have to look for these opportunities because they always come to us, when we're finally willing to say, what of myself am I willing to put aside for the greater good of more than me? And I think it's something that, just as we are feeling our emotions and building up the equity for conscious expansion, once consciousness starts expanding, we don't have to try to think this way. It just becomes impossible to think any other way.
On that same notion of expansion of consciousness, it really seems that what you're speaking about too is that this idea of love within oneself, this concept of true universal source love that we all have, that when we truly begin to expand, and we expand through love and grace and gratitude and all of these beautiful concepts that really make us up as human beings, that something happens. We start to become something again.
Yes.
There's almost like a renaissance or a rebirth of who we become. Who do you think we become when this expansion happens and we start to understand the true sense of love, of oneself? What do we become? Who do we become again?
I think it's a great question. I really love the way you're putting it. And there is a sense of becoming because there is a forward movement in the journey. So there is an emergence, absolutely, whether gradually or spontaneously. But what's interesting is that there's two movements that are happening. One is, it seems like I am becoming something I've never known within myself to be. Then there's another movement where what we're actually doing is we're unbecoming anything that has distorted the remembrance that we are nothing but the love dwelling in the oneness and hearts of all. So what we become is a fresh remembrance as we unbecome all the things that made us think love was a choice versus a reality that is seeing through these eyes, speaking these words, and receiving what I'm saying to you.
It's the divinity.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
Absolutely.
It's like the lowest divinity, just the
divinity of who we are.
Absolutely. And I love the word divinity, and I spend so much time in oneness with divinity and, in samadhi, and I'm so blessed by the experiences I have. And what's interesting is that sometimes we use words, and some people can make distinctions about divinity and being separate from the person. And when we focus on love as the center of the universe, what happens is we wind up erasing these imagined lines and barriers that distinguish, here's where divinity begins, here's where humanity ends, or vice versa. That really the human being is where the divine is experiencing its greatest expansion within the physical form. And so I think that when we focus on love, because love is an energetic vibration as well as the source of emotional sustenance. And so we have to have a focus on something that satisfies us esoterically and emotionally, not exchanging one for the other. So I like to focus on love, not just because it's the midpoint between our chakras. And even if we look at the crucifix, where the two lines intersect is in the heart. And so it really is the center of our being. It is a doorway or gateway into our inner energetic self. It's almost the central sun that we carry within the body of the cosmos. That is our individual expression. And really through love is where the personal self and our divine essence reunite, dissolving and collapsing any perceptions of separation. And out of that is a rebirthing of this remembrance where we are becoming more of our divinity while grounded in physical form. And so it's a beautiful unfolding of alchemy.
Well, grounded in the physical form, because that's the key. That is the key that all of us in these housed in these physical shells, right, during this life incarnation have to deal with, is staying grounded while re-emerging or reconnecting with our spirit self, our light self, and remembering the connectedness to everything, the oneness of everything.
Absolutely.
No.
Love it.
Just more questions. Just keep rolling through.
He's never had this many questions.
I love this. This is phenomenal.
Well, this is, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, in this series, we're talking to people, scientists, doctors, you know, across the board. But in our work, we teach about love centered, you know, so for us, I think this is, you know,
juicy.
Yeah, it's juicy.
I love it.
I didn't know where this was going to go. No. I had all sorts of questions that have nothing to do with this, but.
Why did you mention the cross? What does that do with love?
Because the cross is a symbol of surrender. The cross is the symbol of whether life is going my way or not. I know that I have been brought here to fulfill a mission of the universe's highest will. And what I call my personal will is a fantasy projected upon the divine will that I have forgotten innocently and lost sight of. And so the symbol of the crucifix is one where when your arms are extended out, your heart is the most exposed. And so the awakening of consciousness is where we learn how to live with an undefended heart. It's where the process of crucifixion, even though it looks like our families or our friends are turning against us or betraying us, it's actually the universe doing everything it can to crack open and break apart and dismantle any amount of hiding spots we have, where a hiding spot is not protecting us from things we're afraid of. A hiding spot is imprisoning and hiding us from the recognition of our own divinity and light. And so it is the breaking open of the divine heart space by enduring moments that didn't seem like they were yours to choose, and allowing yourself to be open, unguarded, and undefended, that allows the heart of truth to open metaphorically and allow for a rebirth of consciousness, which is symbolized in the parable of a crucifixion and a resurrection. I'm not a very religious person, but I look at a lot of these stories as metaphors and parables of the journey of awakening that we all go through throughout a course of many lifetimes.
Good. Very good. Matt, that was excellent.
Thank you.
Truly amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Spot on, my friend.
Can I pivot a little bit?
Go ahead. If you must.
I must.
Truly. I love. I'm like, oh, they're so cute. By the way, just a little thing, you know, when it's, you know, we all represent or lead with a certain, you know, vibrational polarity. So, you know, there's the divine feminine, the divine masculine, right? There's one that carries the Christ consciousness code, one that carries the code of the divine feminine. We can talk about Mary Magdalene, all the Egyptian mystery schools. And when those two parts come together, right, like the masculine and feminine representing the two hemispheres, the brain coming together into an activation of oneness, it literally births into the world new realities and new creations through the oneness of lovemaking and intimacy. So when I look at you guys together, I go, oh, I see what this is. And I'm just so grateful to know that our world is being enriched by what you are bringing to the world individually and together.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
also channel Mary Magdalene, so she'll be happy to hear you said that. She'll be like, I must be doing something right with these two.
Right? She's great.
She is pretty great, but tough at times. She can be pretty tough with us. So let's bring up a topic, because this comes up a lot: the twin flame versus the soulmate. So we know we're doing this twin flame thing, which isn't easy.
No.
And so many people think, oh man, twin flames, right?
Right.
You guys are so lucky. And we're like, really? No, this is hard work. And I saw a video that you had described it, which is identical to the way the guides we work with described it. And I'd love for you just to share with people that observation, insight that you have on the twin flame relationships.
Yes, I was just thinking about twin flames and soulmates and the way it's been defined historically. And I had this thought of like, well, what we're calling a twin flame could be more of like a soulmate, like someone that we're partnering up with for the purposes of accelerating both of our spiritual expansion. A twin flame seems like a word that where we're reflecting our light back to each other after we've done a certain amount of work. And what if we just changed the definitions and just flipped it around? I did that, just thinking I'm just going to put it out, see if it helps anyone. A lot of people loved it. A few people who are very attached to the old definition really didn't like it. And I was very surprised because I'm not used to having any kind of oppositional response. I don't mind it, but it was just very surprising. And it was just, for me, it was a way to be able to suss out of intimate partnership the way people can use old spiritual paradigm to perpetuate codependency. Whereas people will be in relationships where all hell is breaking loose and they're being mistreated. And they say, but I have to be in this relationship to master acceptance, or I have to be mistreated because if it still hurts, I must have an ego. And there's all these ways in which people can overly spiritualize a toxic environment. And I wanted to create a teaching where we say, hey, we're coming together in partnership. Whether we're working it out together, that's a choice. What you don't choose to work out with a partner, you work out with the partner within yourself. And let's have a way to see this journey through from a place of freedom and renewal instead of using mystical ideas to perpetuate codependency. And a lot of people were very freed by it. And that was my only intention, because I think when we look at the history of spirituality, spirituality is a place where we can have our greatest insights. It's also a space where we can justify and feed and soothe our most insidious patterns. So many cults will show us this dynamic. And I think it's just one where if I'm going to be someone who people hear and inspired by, I want to make the world a more conscious place. I want to make the world a more heart-centered place, but I want to make the world, especially the spiritual journey, a more mature place. Mm-hmm. And I don't want spirituality to be a place where we reinvent our egos and take it out on each other. I want it to be a space where we come together in community to deal with the bravery and courage it takes to be accountable, to be aware, to go without, and to literally go through this process of transmutation in which support can be so helpful when it's being done from a place of authenticity instead of done codependently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I loved about it. I thought you were spot on. So, I think part of the thing is that so many times people think the twin flame should be a romantic partner. And that's mostly, at least from the information that we get, also is that that's often not the case, right? Yeah. You're here to do big work together. It could be a brother, it could be a boss, it could be a mother, so, I think that's really the thing that people need to get beyond, that it's, if you show up for that, you got to get all of your ego out of the way.
100%. And I think that when you're doing this deep work, sometimes the deep soul work can really kind of interfere with the romantic fire. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But the thing I love about what you said the most, here's what I love about this. When people really realize that twin flame doesn't necessarily have to mean romantic connection, then that is going to create a place of accountability where in the spiritual path, a teacher who is really modeling and embodying consciousness can be that twin flame energy to anyone they're guiding, but there's a boundary that does not get ever crossed. And it's a beautiful thing to demonstrate. So I think there's just still a lot of fantasies that we have about unrequited love. We have, when I've been thinking about, the woman I'm going to marry since I was 12 years old. And unimportant, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. But there's a really interesting thing in maturity where it's almost as if whether you manifest the very thing you desire or it's released from your grip of attachment, either way, the same experience dawns. And people that have never had their love requited will sit there and go, it's not the same thing, but it's a very strange thing. It's kind of like if you had the dream of something that never happened. In the absence of it happening, you actually gain all the experience and who you would have been had it happened. But people don't see that because they're too attached to what does or doesn't happen. So I think it's very interesting that the sensation of finding love, releasing the attachment of needing love, actually awakens the same depth of consciousness. And I think that as we mature on these spiritual paths, it's wonderful to have desires. I think everyone in the world should find their love. And I just want to sit around all day and just watch people's wedding videos. But at the same time, it's so painful to tell yourself a story that my life is not fulfilled because something hasn't happened. And I think that when we start to let go of that attachment, it starts to feel like the death of our ego. And the benefit of awakening is when we start to find death before it finds us. And so I think there's just such a new level and horizon of conscious expansion on this planet, and the level of maturity it requires in order to access it and even respect it is what the world is currently being prepared for.
It's interesting. How often do you hear a spiritual teacher really talk about maturity? They'll use every other word but maturity. Now, it just sort of dawned on me that, as you were saying it, it's incredible, right? Because it brings us to accountability.
It really does. And I also love that maturity is a tenet of, the consciousness that you cultivate by surviving certain experiences. But it's also, maturity is a very emotional thing. Sometimes in spirituality, people can think of consciousness as this interesting bypass mechanism.
Right. I was hoping you were going to use that. Yeah.
Right.
I was hoping you were going to say bypass, because that's exactly.
Yeah. Where I don't have to actually be accountable as a human being. But I think that what the biggest realization is that it takes a spiritual master to really embody the true potential of a human being. And I said this during a talk recently because I was dialoguing with someone, and I was just, we were talking, and they were talking about time as an illusion. And I said, perhaps time is only an illusion once we've learned to master using our time wisely. And that's maturity. That maturity is not hiding our choices behind spiritual justifications. Maturity is knowing, here's what's good for me, here's what's good for others. It might be different than what I desire, but the true difference between a child and an adult is an adult always does what they know is right and is not taken over by their desires. And so I think it's really interesting that we teach waking up and growing up simultaneously, because so many of us have been innocently traumatized by wounds from our past. And based on where our traumas are, there's a certain part of our emotional body that stops maturing and growing. And so I think that to be spiritually aware but emotionally immature is only going to make us more socially awkward. And it's really time for us to integrate and put all the pieces together in a really mature and compelling way.
I want to just mention something a little bit off the cuff a little bit.
I love off the cuff.
By profession, I'm a speech and language pathologist, pediatric, and I work with children with special needs, but I'm also a linguist.
And a channeler.
When I hear you speak, your grammar, your lexicon, the way you use language is quite unique. It's very accessible.
Thank you.
But your vocabulary is really unique.
Thank you.
And I'm kind of wondering.
Is he from another planet?
No. I have the sense that you've always had this in you, but never expressed yourself this way before. And in this incredible maturity that you speak about, you have just expanded into this incredible voice, larynx, that expresses itself, and I can only say through the divine, in a way that I have never heard before.
I know.
Anyone express like that.
Thank you.
And I can only say this is kind of what's coming, that it's just incredible.
Thank you.
It's lighting me up. You might
love that.
I am lit up. I am enlivened. I am enlightened. And I feel every tingling throughout my head and my body every time you use these words and place them together like this. It's just
amazing, actually.
Incredible.
It's almost like,
Thank you.
we talked to Paul Selig too, like, how his books have a vibration. Your words have a vibration. It's almost like, it's almost like there's attunements happening without people realizing they're happening.
Oh yeah.
Well, we're realizing it, but I think sometimes when you're talking to people, they may not realize what's actually happening, but their chakras are getting lit up. Their auric field is like becoming expanded with these words.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there is a chance that you guys have had past lives because your families seem very similar.
I'm sure. Like, it's a fascinating thing when I learned that I channel healing energy through my words, and there's a point in my life, and I've always been doing this in certain ways, but when it became this emergence, there was something I learned to talk without thinking. Meaning a lot of people will think, come up with something they're going to say, and then wait for the opportunity. What I seem to do is I seem to put words together that create vibrational sequences that give people access to the energy that I'm embodying and channeling. And so it's my way of giving people a direct experience of the very vibration that is coming through. It's a very interesting thing because it's like the universe uses my vocabulary, my words, my interest in entertainment or whatever, or my ability to joke and be funny. And it uses every bit of it to touch and reach as much of the world as is possible. And, when I was younger and doing this, I would have to just start talking. And I knew there was a point in there somewhere, and it was a Pink Floyd concert. Like, the server would come to my table and go, "What would you like for lunch?" Okay, we're going to start out talking about this, and then the keys of Enoch are going to come, and there was just a certain point of me refining my abilities where I don't know what happened, but there came this ability for me to just succinctly boom, and I'm just so comfortable in it. But it's been something that I've been learning and mastering in a very mysterious way. So when you say that, my heart smiles and I say, thank you. And here's what I'll share with you. This is very funny. I remember once I was talking to someone in a dialogue, and it was like, not like I wasn't like working with someone professionally. It was kind of like a peer in our field. I forgot who it was. And, they were in their position. Okay, cool. And they looked at me and they said, "You can't put the truth into words." And I thought, oh, yes, you can. Because words are keys, and keys open doors. And if you come at it vibrationally and you've been attuned to a certain level, you actually can use words to convey and activate and awaken the truth. And it's just been something that as I've developed this, like I know Paul, because I know Paul personally, has his own way of doing things. And I had never seen him before. And I remember I was at a same retreat center, and I walked in and I saw him and I went, oh, I see. And so it's just interesting that the universe is running rather sophisticated healing modalities and language patterns through whatever space is willing to be open. And that's just been my life joy, is just how open can I be?
Well, I was just going to say, once you surrender.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're not surrendering into it, the universe can't work with you. It won't work with you because your ego's in the way. And it's not going to serve the highest possible good for all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you are spot on when you say the universe will use everything that we have available to us as a soul to heal ourselves and heal others. That's, again, spot on. Well said.
I appreciate that.
Well said.
I remember when I was a kid, all my friends had these goals, right? Like this friend wants to be like Michael Jordan. This one wants to be a police officer. When I discovered spirituality, and I remember I was like 12, my first experience when I was 8, but like when I really discovered spirituality, my parents would like give me books because they were into spirituality. They'd give me books. And I remember saying to myself, it was so funny. And this is such my precocious 12-year-old mind. I remember saying, I don't know what the highest dimension is, but that's where I'm going. Which is, of course, what a 12-year-old thinks, right? The highest has to be the best, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was, this is what captured my heart. And I literally set an intention. I said when I was 12, I want to see the miracles of the universe front row and center. I want to sit front row and watch the miracles of the universe reveal themselves to me. And I literally sit on stage and I'm literally living out the fulfillment of a desire and dream I put out when I was 12. And so it's so humbling. And for me, every time I intuit, every time I do what I do, it's always like the very first time. It's always like you surf a tidal wave. It's always exhilarating. It's always like I get off stage, I get on stage for hours. I will channel teachings I've never even heard of, and I will be teaching myself in front of 500 people, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I get off stage, and I'm sitting there as amazed as everyone's like, can you believe that? And I'm sitting there going, can you believe that? And for me, that's what makes this so beautiful and genuine, is that it's always as if for the first time, because we're bringing through timeless energy. And so every time you touch timelessness, it always feels like the first time ever.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, when we really get out of the way and let our guides come through and do their magic, we're blown away. We're like, did that just happen? Or
that's so true.
I didn't really know anything about that, because we're always careful about touching the world of quantum, right? Because, that's a whole world. I mean, we're artists. I used to be a publicist and, a journalist or whatever. Yeah. So, I didn't, this is kind of a new chapter for us on our second phase in life, right? This whole spiritual awakening, and put everything else aside and do this now. And it's like, okay, but we don't know anything about quantum realities except for, now we're reading about it, and it seems to be showing up in ways that, how do I put this? We're not being asked to be experts at quantum, because that's not who we are, right? And, you're not going to have a lot of credibility with quantum physicists if you go and try and do that. But if you surrender and just kind of get out of the way, the quantum field will work through you.
Right.
That's what it appears to me anyway. It seems like it works through you, and you don't have to explain it. You just have to live it, I guess.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like it's easier to give someone a drink of water than to describe what it tastes like. You could say like water, like actually, because I love food, I'm into cooking a lot. And I actually was thinking like, what is the flavor descriptor of water? And I was actually figuring out that the taste of water is how pristine it is. That pristine is actually an experience through our senses. But rather than trying to convince someone what does pristine taste like, you give them a sip of water. And once they've had a sip of water, they are now informed. And I love quantum reality, and I love scientific data. And I love everything, because I think everything's a matter of integration. It's a holistic model. So everything's included. But what I think is interesting is that when you are trying to prove or disprove a certain standpoint, especially the proving of a greater reality, those greater realities exist in the absence of the one looking for the evidence of it. So it's kind of a funny little thing about we're trying to prove the existence of something that is more available in our sensory perception when the one seeking the evidence disappears. And so it's kind of this funny little thing about proof and data, and it all has its time and place. But I think that's why what you're doing, what I'm doing, what we're doing is we're giving people evolutionary expansion through direct experiences. That it's one thing to read something and then to start seeing signs of it everywhere, which is what we do in our perceptual filters. But it's another thing to just give someone an experience and go, now let's talk about what that meant for you. And now we're actually processing wisdom, because wisdom is the consciousness we gain from our direct experiences. Knowledge is what's preparing us for experiences we've yet to have. And so I think it's just really important in today's day and age that we're giving people access to their own inner wisdom and allowing themselves to taste, touch, and feel what is here to be discovered.
Yeah, actually, what you just spoke about was something that was on my pre-planned questions. And and it's actually in your book also. And that's validation. That yes. How you speak about is that you say everyone has the right to be heard.
Yes.
So what is a way to be heard in a healthy way? Because one of the things I want to point out about the book, since I want to make sure that we touch upon this, and this cracked me up and it got me into your sense of humor, because there was a lot of times where, wait till you read the chapter about his family. You're going to be like, oh my God, that's my family.
There's a few funny stories in there.
Oh, there's some great funny stories. But in every, so you have reverence, for example, is one example, reverence in action, reverence as a daily practice. But then the funny part is in each section, there's a part that says, what could go wrong?
That's right. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And I thought that was brilliant because, a lot of times when we're teaching, right, collectively, I'm talking about all of us out there just trying to help people, right? There's a point where you can get into your own grave of like, whoa, no way, I'm really trying to help, I'm trying to serve, and they took it the wrong way. So that's why I think those sections in the book, I think, are genius.
Thank you.
Because you're giving people, you're going to go down this rabbit hole and I'm going to help you.
And those sections are really just making sure as we're absorbing and learning and applying this to make sure we're doing it from a place of detachment, and when we talk about listening, what I think is interesting is that when we listen from a deep enough place, it's not even that people feel like you're agreeing with their standpoint. They actually feel seen in a way where that standpoint doesn't have to actually be used in a defensive way or something that we hide behind. And that I've just noticed throughout my life, and I talk about this in the book, when I learned how to really listen, and what happened for me is I had to realize that my interest in listening was proportionate to whatever I thought I knew or didn't know about someone. And when someone was a mystery, I was the most interested and engaged in learning about a person. And when I was the least interested in listening to someone, it was because of the amount of assumptions I had made about them, which made so this has no value. Why am I listening to this? Oh my God, you've been talking for 10 minutes. What about me? Treating a conversation like, jump rope when you're a kid, just waiting for that moment to kind of, okay, I got something brilliant to say. Don't you want to ask about me? I'm pretty brilliant. And when we listen, the amazing thing about unity consciousness is that if we listen deep enough, we actually feel seen and heard. They feel seen and heard. We don't need to decide who's right and who's wrong, because the only right action is a space that allows everyone to have their say without a final conclusion. So I find that listening, and whether we apply it to things like meditation or mindfulness and presence, listening, which is part of witnessing and part of our sensory awareness, is really how we start to get into a surrendered space that is the most functional to apply. Because most people will surrender in meditation, get totally blasted out, go out into the world, and it's kind of a mess. And so when we learn to be present and grounded through listening, we are able to stay in our bodies. We're able to honor the experience of other people's bodies, and we're able to meet as individuals where we are all question marks to one another. When we wake up, we're actually question marks onto ourselves. And as long as we are a mystery. And as long as other people are a mystery, there's nothing but a natural flow of interest and engagement, which allows everyone to remember the fulfillment and wholeness that's always present in all of us.
Wow. I know. He just stops us, doesn't he?
You're almost, I mean, you truly are speaking from
Source is working through you.
Like the universe. Very, physical, emotional way that we as human beings interact with each other socially. Yeah. But you also are speaking through this incredible, profound soul to soul.
Yeah.
When you truly listen to someone and you're present with that individual, and you don't even have to say the words. It's almost like your soul is saying to that soul, I acknowledge you.
That's right.
I see you.
Mm-hmm.
I see you, soul.
Yeah,
and it's just incredible. The healing that comes out, that is the result of, and I love this word, osculation, which means listening.
Oh, osculation?
Yes, that's from a speech and hearing.
Well, first of all, I love that osculation. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Our words.
I was going to say earlier, and this just dropped in. Yes. Obviously, I meant to say this. So you're a speech pathologist. This is interesting. Yes. So here's the funny journey that I come from. So here I am in my current reality, like doing what I do. When I was in elementary school, I had a severe stuttering problem. And I was in speech therapy, like for most of elementary school. So what's interesting is and I forgot that happened. Totally forgotten. And my sister and I were talking. She's like, remember when? I'm like, I used to stutter, what? And so it's interesting how, even just the things that are our weaknesses early in our life somehow create the stage for greater strengths. And I think that when we live our lives feeling just to circle back to listening, when we in our lives feel as if no one is hearing us, that is a transition into a greater masterful strength when it dawns on us. If I can feel how resentful I am that no one hears me, what if I start to hear others the way I don't think others are listening to me? And that's when the power of osculation, is that the word?
Yes, yes. And there are many theories that you speak about as a result of this disfluencies or stuttering, that of not being heard,
yes,
of not being recognized, of not being heard by those that love them. It's just a theory, though. But you could take it to another step, to more of a spiritual level as well. And I think you did.
Yeah.
You certainly did take it to the next level and beyond. You went straight to source, my friend.
So this is the funny thing. About a year ago, I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, and apparently I stopped breathing throughout the night regularly. I had this test done, and they're like, so Matt, you stop breathing like 23 seconds at a time. Okay. How often do I do that? Well, you do about 54 times an hour. Oh, okay. So this is serious. And so I was joking with someone that maybe I channel the universe so eloquently because I live more of my life in the Akashic records than I do on this planet. And we were joking about that. But it's such an amazing thing where for all of us, because you channel, I channel. What I found fascinating was one day I had this funny little realization about channeling. Because, what I realized is that we're all channels. And that we're all channeling our egos until we build up the ability to tune into different frequencies. And so I think that in this world where we're all channeling, whether we're channeling embellished qualities or unfulfilled desires or whatever it is, or the universe, I think what's amazing is that the beauty of consciousness, even though consciousness is one, that there are all these infinite expressions of the one. So consciousness as a one moves in a collective, like migration pattern, like birds. And what it really shows us is that even though we're all one, we're all needed to participate in the unfoldment of one. And even in this conversation, we appear to be three different versions of that one. And yet we all need to come together to manifest and create what we are, building and sending out to the world for everyone to receive. And so I think it's just a beautiful thing where, consciousness is one, but each individual one has a very vital role to play in order for that one to fully fulfill its expression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, how our guides kind of explain it is very similar to that, but they're not as eloquent as you are.
No, they're not. Because I'm not as eloquent. Maybe I'll get there though.
Well, they'll say, the examples that you brought up earlier, right? So like say here's source, right? Here's universal consciousness, right? Out here. And then you've got all these hairs on the head, right? And they all make up the one. And so, we're the subatomical particles, but we're also, the whole atom and the whole thing, right?
Sure.
We're part of it, but we're also the whole. So when we asked about, when the Yeshua energy comes through us, when the Magdalene energy comes through us, it's like an individualized essence of source expressing itself as that thread.
Yes.
That piece of hair is coming through, expressing itself as the individualized aspect of source.
Totally.
And then it steps back and expresses itself as the whole.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's how you also describe it too, with the experience of it. So that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. I always love ways in which I've never heard it metaphorically, contextualized, but I love that because it just gives so much texture to the complexity. And I think that, one of the ways we learn to cope with life is to oversimplify it. And I think that life is far too complex. Life is far too meaningful to be oversimplified. There are things that when we have realizations, of course, things are made incredibly simple and everything falls into place and everything's right in the universe. But I think that there is a complexity to life that our spiritual wisdom doesn't free us from the need to think and to bring meaning into our lives, that really we become so awestruck by the reverence and the beauty and the complexity of life that we really realize that we need both our minds and our hearts fully activated so we can be fully engaged in this beautiful thrill ride where we're both getting closer to truth. And while we get closer to truth, it's not necessarily that we do or don't have answers. It's that we become we remember so much of our wholeness that the questions disappear. And I think we live in a reality where we think a good answer satisfies a question, where what the answer really is a space in which questions are given permission to dissolve.
Yeah.
Because it's almost as if they naturally take a back seat because it's not part of the vibration anymore that even matters.
How is it possible that the heart, the spirit of who we are, the consciousness is expanding? Yes. How is it that we, I'm trying to say this, I'm trying to put it in a way that you're speaking about science and you're speaking about spirituality.
Yeah.
But how is it that they're compatible, and how is it they both seem to be expanding at the same rate? It seems as one expands, the other expands. If one doesn't expand, then the other one doesn't expand.
Right.
Is there a relationship between our science and our consciousness?
I would say definitely. I would say that the expansion of consciousness expands the horizons of what science can be aware of as evidence and creates more expansive conclusions that then will bring more of those realities into our perceptual field of awareness. And it's becoming more aware that is constantly expanding consciousness in the same way that if I become more physically active, I'm not only going to burn more calories, I'm not only going to lose weight, but it's also going to probably regulate my blood sugar and lower my blood pressure. So I think in the same way, consciousness is the governing, ever-expanding agent of the universe. And anything within the field of consciousness is going to be upgraded and transformed as consciousness expands. And because science is the exploration of possibilities, let's say, I don't know, I'm just making, but the exploration of possibilities, that the more consciousness expands, the more those possibilities expand in our awareness. And so I think it's a very, even though some people could say like, oh, there's heart-centered experiences, there's mind-based science, and then we have things like heart math that are really kind of merging those things beautifully. I think really what it is that there are different aspects of our beingness: the mind, the heart, the nervous system, the ego. And I think we're coming into a very integrated model of consciousness that I call the new paradigm, where really everything is included. Everything is a part of a holistic model. You know, we're kind of past this overly simplified place where we decide to blame all the inconveniences of life on some criminal, like, oh, it's the ego, or, hey, we've gotten together at this spiritual event, let's talk crap about the mind. That's real sacred, right? And instead of doing all this nonsense, like, could you imagine climbing to the Himalayas? You get to this big temple where some enlightened master is supposed to live, and you're sitting there in some sort of satsang, and everyone's just gossiping about the mind. You're like, what? No. This is a holistic model. Nothing gets thrown under the bus, not our egos, not our minds, not our conditioning. It's a holistic model, and it's no different than how my parents lived when raising me in the 80s. And that is, if something doesn't work within one moment of trying to operate it, it's defined as broken instead of something I don't know how to operate. And the universe is something we're learning to operate. Like, we don't know how these vessels work. We don't know how to fly spaceships. We don't know how to operate our conscious energy fields. And so the owner's manual of these fields is the experiences we gain each day. And so I think that when we start to see problem is really a misunderstanding for a bigger process we don't know we're in. And as we start to understand how everything is connected, we start to see that things play certain roles for higher purposes, instead of things either being healed, broken. And just like even, I saw my father do when I was a kid, God bless my father's soul, right? How many times was the television broken? And it was just the fact that the remote control needed new batteries. I mean, it's just that simple.
Well, that's better than what mine did, which was, look for a piece of duct tape to put on everything that was broken. Nice.
Duct tape and Vicks Vapor Rub. These were the cornerstones of our upbringing.
They were. Oh, I do want to ask one question about that. I know we're running over here a little bit. So I just want to ask the one question, because I think it's an important one for those of us who still have triggers. Yeah. So everything that you're talking about, and, I love, and I've heard you say this in interviews before, where you're off on your spiritual journey, everything's kind of working, you feel expansive, you're feeling the love. And then there's those people in your family or wherever it happens to be, and you unravel. You're like, oh my God, the triggers are still coming up. And I love that you were so vulnerable in your book and talking about your family, because I think, when we're vulnerable, it allows other people to be vulnerable too, right? And to speak their truth. So when you were going through some of these triggers, right, with your family members, was there a point where suddenly it washed over you? Yes. Was there a point where it was like, okay, oh my God, it's not triggering me anymore? And what was that pivotal point, maybe shared in a way that can help others go through the muck as well?
That's a great question. If I think back, which I haven't really thought about this other than when you asked me, so I appreciate you asking. What happened was I found myself spontaneously, and I don't think I moved myself. I think I was just moved, but I spontaneously found myself for the first time in my life on the same side as truth. Throughout my life, what would trigger me about people, and you could look at triggers as I don't like how they're talking to me, they're being disrespectful. You could look at the surface of all that stuff, and that's relevant. But what happens is that people get intimidated by confrontation because a lot of people's experiences with truth are the threat of rejection, the anticipation of neglect or abandonment or whatever it is, even abuse sometimes. What I found is that my relationship with honesty or truth was a dysfunctional one, because anytime my parents would confront me about something, and then sometimes it would be more like an interrogation than a conversation, is the truth in the beginning of my journey was a place of disempowerment. So it was a place I was always trying to move away from. And I found that when I was around my family and I was somehow on the same side of honesty and truth, that at a certain point in my evolution, not only did truth and honesty feel the best in my body, it felt better to be honest than it did trying to prove to someone how amazing I was, which is my upbringing, and how to sell myself and perform. I wasn't being myself, I was performing myself, right? It was like this one-man show, where no one had bought a ticket to. It was really quite one-sided. And I found myself just all of a sudden being soothed by honesty and truth. And as soon as I was soothed by honesty and truth, I had an ability to communicate with people that allowed me in some way to feel not beyond being hurt by them, but it put me in a place where things just stopped hurting, because I realized the greatest pain in my life was not what people did to me. It was how divided I was from truth. And so, like, for example, like if a family member came up to me and said, "Oh, blah, 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 why did you do that?" The old me would have been defensive and said, "I didn't mean to. Why are you accusing me? Why don't you be nice to me?" Or if I'm coming from my spiritual ego, "Wow, that's a real low vibe way of saying that. And I got to go sage myself and bring my vibration up so the universe doesn't give my soulmate to my neighbor," or whatever nonsense we believe. And instead I would say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that. I must have been just too caught up in my own reality, and I wasn't really considering your feelings. I'm so sorry about that." And I found myself being so brutally honest with people. And all of a sudden, instead of feeling like I'm exposing myself, I'm unlovable, I actually found my own wholeness. But my wholeness was on the same side of truth and honesty. And only when I built a bridge to truth and honesty, and then burnt the bridge behind me so I had nowhere else to be, only then did I discover how to interact with people at different levels of consciousness without being harmed by their behavior.
Powerful.
Yeah.
I truly and wholeheartedly understand what you're saying. And it truly does take a open heart, an expansion of consciousness to be aware of this in every single present moment, especially when there is some type of confrontation. You have to completely be aware of what is going on and how you're going to present yourself. For me, I will literally put myself in these situations. I will visualize myself having these situations, and then I will see myself how I'm going to respond or how I would like to respond. And that will become then my reality. So once this truly does happen in this particular moment, it just occurs. I become that visualization or that being that I saw happen. You open up to truth. It is the truth of not just your truth, but the truth of everyone else, the universe itself. Because truth is relative to the individual soul that's having the experience.
Absolutely.
And that's really what it takes. And it is a practice.
Well,
it's a very,
Well, and, just even to piggyback on what you're saying, which I love how eloquently you're putting it, both of you, is one of the bridges, and this might help people that are watching this, because we want to be on the same side of honesty and truth. Here's something I did, and this was a very spontaneous practice because I do things very spontaneously. Whenever I was in conflict with someone, I would ask myself a very strange question. And it was a question that always helped my consciousness wake up out of the engagement. And what I would ask myself when I was in conflict with someone, and really it wasn't a matter of someone being in conflict with me, it was when I was engaged in conflict with them, but back. The question I'd ask myself is, what am I trying to sell this person? For some reason, that question, what am I trying to sell them, was linked to my inability to hold my own vibrational standpoint in the presence of someone else's. And I realized that I was divorcing myself from the ability to listen, see, hear, and feel, and recognize and acknowledge them as an extension of me. And instead, I was being this separate individual trying to sell them on something to get them to see me the way I thought I needed to be seen to fill a void that only I could fill through my own self-love. So one of the things I would do is a very strange question, but it became so masterful, is if I got triggered, I would ask myself, whatever is triggering me, and it's usually only when I was engaged with other people, what am I trying to sell them? Because I learned at a very young age how to sell myself. I was raised in Los Angeles. I was a child actor, and you learn to sell yourself and give the elevator pitch. And then you have to wake up out of your own either inherited or developed self-manipulation in order to be aligned with truth. And so not as a way of exposing myself in a negative way, but just as a way of kind of reorienting myself. What am I trying to sell this person on? And as soon as I asked the question, everything that was triggering me disappeared. It was very fascinating.
I like that.
Yeah, as someone who's been a publicist for a long time and used to write those elevator pitches for people.
Exactly.
I still get asked to do it. That really brought home. That's a really great question. I mean,
it's a tool to use.
It's a great tool. Yeah. I mean, we often ask when people came to us about the conspiracy theories and the vax, no vax, this whole, we would literally just say, is it plugging into love or is it plugging into fear? Those were the two questions that we would ask, is like, think about when you're hearing a conspiracy theory or an idea and you're trying to think, is this legit? Is it valid? It's like, well, is it on the side of love or is it on the side of fear? Right. Simple, easy question, right? That's one of the things that we turn to. But as a publicist for so long, I love that. That might actually help me a lot.
I mean, it's a natural thing, and I think it's I think what's interesting is that we're healing our wounds, we're soothing ourselves, we're loving ourselves, we're doing that, and along the way, there's also this learned wisdom that we uncover. And one of them is starting to become aware of, and again, we're all heart-centered beings, we're all innocent at our core, but we start to become aware of what patterns of manipulation either run us or we use to run other people. How we learn to, instead of relate to people, how we try to manage other people's expectations or experiences. And for me, and my dad was a salesman his whole life by occupation, I was a child actor and always performing. And so instead of being myself, I was always performing myself. And I learned from a very young age to read the audience and to kind of adjust the dial. And then I became aware that that was actually the source of my own imbalance, the source of my own woundedness. And when there was a conflict, I realized I was trying to get someone to see something differently, and that may not be what they need for their journey, which is similar to what I write about in the book, where we could have an insight that we think is going to change someone's life. But if they haven't asked a question that lets us know they have room in their mind for that, then we're actually just trying to fast track someone's healing, because innocently enough, or agenda-wise, we want to fast track other people's healing because we want to feel better around them. So it's an interesting thing when we start to unhook from inherited or developed patterns of manipulation, because everyone at their core is soothed by truth and wants to be connected to truth. But in order for truth to be safe, we have to unravel the patterns, the ploys, the agendas that truly keep us separate from love.
And be honest enough to see them, right? I mean, that was probably your chapter 2. It's not a matter of what anyone else doesn't know.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. That was powerful, actually.
Yeah.
With that, so we are running out of time, but oh my God, we could talk to you all night, Matt, because you like food. If you live closer, we'd say, come on over.
I know,
we'll
right?
cook for you.
I know, you live in Marin, my God.
Yeah, we live in Marin, and Anthony's Italian and loves to cook. So next time you're down here,
you got it.
You have a place to stay and we will cook for you.
Well, I love that. I am all about food. I went to Italy for the first time a couple of years ago and ate my way through Italy. And of quite a fan of Europe, Italy, France, London, loved it all, but you got it.
There's nothing like a homemade, organic, cooked Italian meal with a bottle of Barolo.
Right?
Yeah. So we'll cook together next time you're down here. So with that, I'm just going to end because I want to make sure that we at least, because I like the words and the vibration, even though everyone's been listening to it for the last hour. I just want to read one thing from your book and then we'll close. And I think it's important to, we've touched on this, but this is worthiness, right? Because when we don't have the worthiness, right, how can we love ourselves, right? So I just wanted to read this. This is the attribute of worthiness. So as your sense of worthiness amplifies, you will notice the natural rhythm of life. No matter how it plays out, we are free to recognize that everything that comes inevitably goes. Anything gained is sure to be lost. Each experience of birth foreshadows an equal experience of death. And then along the way, the prime motivation of ego seeks to control reality, hoping that each beginning, birth, and gain can somehow come without each inevitable loss. So for me, that was like, right? It's like, it's coming back. It wants to control it again. It's kind of touching on a lot of things that we've been talking about tonight.
Yes.
But right where that it just keeps coming because that's its thing that it does. It's rearing its head and saying, I want to come back and be acknowledged. I'm the ego.
Well, and our egos, when we're void of the self-love that we need to remember our wholeness, to whatever degree of ego is really running our show, we're addicted to contrast, which means we're the most intoxicated by the beginning of something. And then as it stays longer and lingers in our reality, it goes from that new shiny object to that same old thing. And so I think in this fast-paced, technologically driven society, which technology is not the problem at all, but in this fast-paced society where we lean on technology as a crutch to keep us unconsciously fast-paced, we are constantly looking to get high off of new. We then get bored of new when it lasts for more than a few minutes, and then we try to trade up for other new. And it's just the repercussions of how we live our lives, objectifying reality, objectifying ourselves, objectifying each other. And it's the awakening of consciousness where you realize the light of you and the light of others is that same undivided light. That really what matters is not how many experiences you've had of awakening, but how deep has it gone to change the way you relate to yourself and human beings, that instead of relating as objects meeting each other, we meet each other as our essence instead of as objects. And that's really the cornerstone of what we look for in the shift of consciousness, is to relate to ourselves and life and others less as objects of desire and more as the sovereignty of essence, that is the oneness of spirit celebrating itself in all forms.
It's a soul-to-soul connection.
Can I say amen to that?
Amen, y'all.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Italian food, here we come.
That's beautiful. That is just,
it's really soul to soul.
It's really beautiful.
It's actually what you're doing with the vibration of your words. You're speaking to people's souls, even if they don't realize it.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Oh my God, Matt, what a pleasure it has been.
Just incredible.
Yeah, really incredible. I mean, I think we should start doing these like over food and wine.
We should.
Beautiful.
Right?
We should.
We shall. So yeah, anything else you would like to add and tell people, workshops that you've got going on? Obviously we know about the book. We're going to be putting a link for everyone to go straight there and get it.
I would say, for more information on my offerings, to sign up for an upcoming event, also to sign up for our free Sunday newsletter and to receive a free transmission that people have really loved over the years. If you go to mattkahn.org, that's mattkahn.org, on the front page, sign up for our newsletter and really allow yourself to be a part of and when I say a global movement, the world is a global movement. But what I love about the offerings that we offer is that we're really creating a safe haven for energetically and emotionally sensitive empaths to find safety, to explore spirituality in a very respectful and mature way, to meet other beings of heart-centered consciousness and learn how to engage in a way that feels good to us. But I love that what we have created, and I say we because we are one and we're all creating it together. What I love that we've created is just this mature container of healing, expansion, and integration where we can really go about the breadth and depth of spirituality, but from a meaningful, practical, and mature place. Like literally channeling and teaching the kind of event I would want to go to. And it is just such an honor to work on behalf of the universe. And it's truly my most humbled honor to serve the souls of every person in this world. And it's just such a great honor to connect with you both, to connect with everyone who's watching this, and to allow this time together to be a remembrance that no matter what we've survived, no matter the climate of our circumstances, love is always here, love is always present, love always has the final say. Love is already won, and we're just going to watch it play out. But the truth is the truth, and it's good news.
Aww. Now we know why you're known as the I love you guy. I know. My God, you really, you actually embody it.
Thank you.
And we can't say that about, everybody who does their work. They don't all embody it. You do embody love. And so we are just honored to have had this incredible time with you. What a sacred time. How many times did your orc field light up?
Mine did, that's for sure. We're all so magical. My goodness.
Well, with that, Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.